Hello, and hello. My name is Liam Dowd, and I'm the managing director at Ethical Corporation by Reuters Events. And as part of this week's virtual responsible business week, I have the pleasure of being joined by Hugh Welsh, the president and general counsel of DSM North America. For a number of years, DSM have been at the forefront of sustainability and putting sustainability at the heart of the business operations and strategies. For a long time, they've set ambitious environmental and social targets and have often linked those targets to both business KPIs and individual KPIs. This ambition was recognised in 2018 at our Responsible Business Awards, where DSM were recognised as the Responsible Business of the Year. So, Hugh, I'm glad we have this opportunity to speak today, and hopefully, garner some insight on the work you're doing at DSM, and hopefully provide our viewers with some fresh ideas. So, firstly, to get the few questions underway, I'd just like to ask yourself, Hugh, how are you? How are you coping with the COVID-19 pandemic, and how are your colleagues at DSM doing as well?
Yep. Thanks, Liam. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today. As you can see with my pandemic beard, we're all taking the COVID-19 in stride. DSM worldwide has managed to keep all of our operations open. And here in the United States, where I have responsibility, we've had 4 colleagues come down with the virus. All have fully recovered. They contracted the virus outside of our facilities, and so that's great. And in some respects, I think that's even a little bit miraculous, given the amount of the spread of the infection, especially in the New York metropolitan area, where we have a lot of our offices and a lot of our manufacturing sites. Our ability to keep our employees healthy and safe has been something that we're very proud of as a company. Just as proud as the work we do on the sustainability front. And I also think it really speaks to the sort of professionalism and discipline of a lot of our site managers and our leaders. So we're pretty grateful there. Our business is doing okay. As you know, a lot of our business is in the nutrition space, and we are living in a time when folks need nutrition now more than ever. And so we're grateful that we've had the opportunity to keep all of our plants running. We're grateful that they've been able to run healthy and safe. And from the business side, things are pretty good in DSM.
That's good. I'm glad to hear it, and I'm glad to hear your colleagues have recovered well. So that's good. That's good news. So I suppose jumping into some of the questions we proposed as part of this interview, as part of the discussions that are ongoing and the recovery work that we're seeing both sides of the pond. There's growing momentum behind the idea of delivering a clean, low carbon, inclusive recovery. And some countries are tying in their stimulus packages with regards to that. I think there was announcements last week where France were stipulating some of those conditions. So what's your thoughts on this, and how, from a kind of corporate perspective, how are you at DSM working to help realize that?
Yeah, I mean, we're encouraged by some of the things going on in Europe. The French government with its stimulus package is trying to encourage folks to move to more high-speed rail versus air travel. We've seen the EU Council suggest a 1 trillion Green Deal, and DSM, through our public advocacy work in Europe, is supporting these types of things. I mean, we're a company that has long worked towards making our own transition to cleaner energy and to more sustainable business practices. So what's going on in Europe today is very encouraging. On my side of the pond, here in the United States, it's a little bit of a different story at the moment. The current administration is really, I think, using this opportunity to roll back a lot of traditional environmental regulations. And we find the colleagues that we work with in Washington and some of the states really on defense at the moment. And that's a bit unfortunate. I know that there's some conversations ongoing with the next round of stimulus here in the U.S. to encourage a cleaner, greener recovery. We hope that gets some traction. I'll be speaking at an event this coming week where we're going to have conversations around the potential price on carbon. And I think at this moment in time, we're going to be challenged in the United States with pushing a climate agenda. I don't want to be Pollyannish. That's just the reality. But I do think that there'll be opportunities down the road that we need to plant the seeds for today. And so we'll continue to push here in the U.S. with respect to carbon pricing, with respect to some meaningful climate change legislation, understanding that the current environment is not productive, but that the future environment may be, and the work needs to be done today.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. And it's you talked before we started the recording. You talked to that event later this week, and with that and many other initiatives, there's that kind of a joined up approach where companies and different associations and organisations are coming together to collaborate both on the COVID-19 pandemic, but also starting to take the initial steps to help us tackle what is going to be the future the climate crisis. So what are, I suppose, some of the lessons we could potentially learn from the past couple of weeks in continuing that momentum as we come out of when we go into the recovery part, to ensure that that collaborative approach and idealism is embraced and even built upon to help us tackle the kind of climate and environmental and social challenges that we face.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody would agree that sort of a disruptive crisis always accelerates trends that were already in motion. And, we talked a little bit about the acceleration of the digitization trend as a consequence of the crisis, where plans to do these types of virtual meetings, which were out 2 or 3 years, have now been accelerated to happen today. I think the trend with respect to climate change and sustainability will also be accelerated. I think that people have realized that maybe it's time to listen to the scientists and listen to the data. I think we've seen what happens when you don't listen to the scientists and don't follow the data. You probably, like me, have watched a lot of Netflix pandemic movies, disaster movies, and every one of them starts the same way. Somebody doesn't listen to a scientist. And I think we'll come out the other end of this with folks, regardless of their potential political perspective, understanding they need to follow the science. And the science on climate change is crystal clear. So I also think we're going to learn through this experience in dealing with the coronavirus what happens when there's collective community of global business leaders, global governments working together to solve a problem, and how that leads to a really positive solution. But on the other side, what happens when global leaders in government and business don't work together, what the adverse consequences look like. And I think what we're living in real time with respect to coronavirus, we're going to see transfer to how we address climate change once we're beyond the sort of health emergency that this current crisis presents.
And you mentioned obviously working to address climate change once we kind of work our way through this current pandemic. And it's one of the, I suppose, the common questions we're getting at the moment from our community is how are companies keeping up with keeping the sustainability as a core focus, whilst many businesses are fighting for their very survival. So I know I touched upon it at the introduction. DSM, it can be unique to a number of companies in the fact that sustainability is very much a core part of your strategy build and approach. But has it been like a concerted effort from yourselves or at yourself at the top and your colleagues to ensure that environmental and social issues and ambitions are still front and center over the past 6 to 8 weeks, and obviously the weeks going forward?
Yeah. I mean, I think this crisis is really going to shake out and demonstrate pretty clearly which companies and which governments take the issue of climate change and sustainability seriously, and which ones really used it as air cover or greenwashing or whatever word you want to use. And I've mentioned that a few times in some of the publications I've put out recently. In DSM, this is a core part of our strategy. I mean, this is what we do in DSM is we invest in solutions that help ourselves and enable our customers to operate their own businesses in a more climate friendly and sustainable way. And so last week we reported our first quarter earnings. We had analyst calls. We had our first virtual annual general meeting. And in all of these events, the issue of climate change and sustainability was discussed. Not because it's a communication strategy, but it would be impossible for us to discuss what our results look like and what our strategy is going forward without doing it in the context of these issues. And so it's something that we talk about every day, and every day externally and every day internally in the company. Later this week, I'm hosting, together with the president of DSM Latin America, our co-CEOs on a virtual America's Town Hall. And one of the key themes of that will be our commitment to continue what we're doing, again, to reduce our own and improve our own environmental footprint by adopting more renewable electricity, by transitioning all of our different businesses to more sustainable platforms. And we have to address this because when we put out the word to the employees, and there's thousands of them, what questions you want our co-CEOs to answer, the number one question, are we still committed to the work that we've put out there on climate change and sustainability? And so it's not something we'd ever choose to run away from, but our own employees and our own customers will hold us accountable for continuing this going forward.
That's good. That's good to hear, and it's good to know that it's still very much at the top and front and center. And you touched upon some of the questions around looking at renewables and the clean energy, and I know you set lofty ambitions, I think a few years ago, across the business operations to go climate, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, climate neutral. I forget the date when you set that for, but there's been many kind of questions and discussions around what will in 2021, what will be the impact of COVID-19 on the momentum behind sustainability and that climate action. We saw, I suppose, a ramping up of rhetoric at the start of this year saying this is the decade of action, and we saw, thankfully, a lot of momentum starting to build pace. And from your personal opinion, what do you think will be the impact from COVID-19 as we go into 2021? I know it's a bit of a crystal ball gazing, and some people don't like to do that because it's hard, obviously, to predict that. But what do you see as potential implications or kind of impact from this as we go into 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an eternal optimist. It's probably my biggest flaw. I'm optimistic about everything. I see great hope and resilience in the future. And so, I'm hoping as we come through this global health emergency, we realize, first of all, that if countries and businesses work together, they can solve any problem there is. And, the COVID-19 infection is proven to be an immense problem. Climate change is even a bigger problem going forward. And I think that if one thing happens is that when governments and businesses cooperate collectively on a global level, we can solve any challenge there is. The second, as I mentioned before, is that science matters, data matters. Everybody can have an opinion, but the facts are the facts, and there are no alternative facts. Climate change is real, and I think we're going to come out of this with the general public thinking for themselves and understanding collectively and with very few exceptions that the science is right, the data is right, climate change is the next problem we have to tackle, or we're going to face a crisis far bigger than the one we're facing today with respect to coronavirus. At a more tactical level, I look at all the things that we're doing as a company, that you're doing as an organization with respect to having virtual meetings. And, historically, those of us that came up in a different generation would think it's a nice thing, but you really need that face-to-face interaction to be effective and successful. I think what we've learned by being forced to use this platform is that it works. We can still be efficient. We can still be productive. We can still work collectively and collaboratively on a global level using digital platforms. Again, disruptive crisis accelerates all the changes that were in process already, and certainly digitization is one of those. I think we're also learning that we don't have to fly all over the world for internal meetings or for conferences. There are alternative ways to do things that are just as effective. I think that will have a meaningful impact on climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. And we also look to build out our own sort of fleet and electrification of our own fleet, where that was an idea that was going to go forward. And at DSM, we would begin to roll that in over the course of a number of years. Maybe that's something that we can accelerate going forward. So there are a lot of different new ways of working, new ways of operating that I think are much more sustainable, both from an environmental point of view, but even from a business point of view. And those things that were on the desk in planning, looking forward over the course of a number of years, will now be accelerated a great deal. And we'll see those coming to fruition in 2021.
That's good. Yeah, I know we touched upon at the beginning before we started this that in the past 6 weeks, 7 weeks, we've kind of sped up work and plans that we had down for 2 to 3 years. So the virtual offerings from us as a business, we're looking at potentially reducing our events and doing more, reducing physical events and doing more virtually. And I think this has forced us to realize, I suppose, that this technology, I think if this didn't come along, I think it would have maybe taken a lot longer, and maybe some people would have been, I suppose, less accepting of it. And I think we've realised how good this technology is and how useful it can be to help us, I suppose, reduce our impact on a number of different forms of business. So we've got time, I think, just for what they call the elevator pitch, the last 60 seconds, that long elevator ride, so to say. From your perspective, we were tasking, corporate leaders to ask, to disclose what action were they taking, what actual action are they taking to help deliver that decade of action. I know there's a lot in front of us right now, but over the coming weeks and months, what can, I suppose, you talk to yourself as yourself taking action to help ensure that DSM North America and your colleagues are in a great place to kick on some of the ambitions that you had?
Yeah, I mean, first, of course, we're going to continue to try to keep everybody safe and healthy. I think that's a given, and we've demonstrated some success doing that so far. So, knock on wood, I'm confident that we'll be able to do that going forward. My personal commitment is, look, we still, as an organization, have some political capital. We still have a voice, even though we can't necessarily travel around to use it. But we'll use the technology to do that. And so, in addition to confronting, I would say, the immediate health emergency, we're still going to continue to use our engagement, our political capital, whatever influence we might have, to make sure that these issues are addressed in the context of every stimulus package that comes up, that these issues are addressed every time we need to fight a rollback of environmental regulation, because it's at the end of the day not good for business nor the environment, to make sure that our employees still feel engaged and that they still feel that the acronym DSM stands for do something meaningful. And that will happen. That's important today. That's important next year. It's going to be important for the next 10 years. And we're going to complete all of the projects that we had underway with respect to moving to 100% renewable electricity here in North America. So we're nearly there already. We just need to bring online some additional solar fields, and we're good to go. So the future looks bright. I know sometimes it's hard to see when we're all locked in our homes doing video conferences, but the future's bright. I'm very hopeful, and I'm actually really looking forward, probably in 2021, getting the chance to see everybody in person again.
That's great, Hugh, and I'm an optimist myself, so it's always great to finish on a note of optimism. So thank you again. Thank you for taking your time to speak to me today. Do appreciate your insights, and keep up the great work, both you and your colleagues at DSM. And I'd like to just finish by saying, hope everyone remains well and stays safe. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.